that's why we're recommending that people continue to invest in defense stocks. And again, people should be holding crypto because the more companies that come out using Bitcoin as a currency in the background and putting it on their balance sheet, the more upside opportunity there is for that space. And in fact, another company just came out today called ProCap Holding, and that is exactly how it was funded.
¿Cómo están? Bienvenidos. Parte 2 del directo de Bolsa. En la mañana se hizo un análisis rápido. Es lunes, inicia la semana, día movido. Ha habido muchas cosas. La sesión está tranquila ya. O sea, en la mañana estuvo agitada en el sentido de que la bolsa estaba subiendo. Había movimientos fuertes por parte de Tesla, de CRCL. Ahorita miren, índices. Pues miren, aquí están. Dow Jones, S&P, Nasdaq. Ganador, Nasdaq, 0.83 positivo. Nada grave, todo va bien. La verdad es que hemos tenido buena rentabilidad ahorita. Y nos fuimos de compras. Hay varias compras que hicimos. Viene Ethereum, por fin. Que alcance. Está en los 2.200, 2.300. Que alcance $100, 2.400. Sería una maravilla. Me alivianaría. ¿Qué más? ¿Qué está pasando? Ingresos semanales, reportes trimestrales de empresas. ¿Qué tenemos? Según ya no tenemos nada el día de hoy, pero ahorita lo vamos a checar. Ya no hay café. No, será mañana. Mañana tenemos FedEx. FedEx y CCL, pero no sé qué es CCL. Carnival Cruise Line, sí es cierto. Ok. Como podrán ver, ya tengo unas noticias abajo, otras arriba. No quiero que nada se me escape. Mm, ¿Qué más? ¿Qué más? Mm, Básicamente todo lo dije en la mañana. Todo lo de la guerra y todo eso. Pero, a ver. Tengo que mandar un mensaje. Aguanten, aguanten. Vamos a ver esto.
See the long end of the yield curve come down, but if we've learned anything in the last year, it's that the Fed does not have control or influence over that.
Yeah. Are we Fed dependent in any way, Steph, at this point, or no?
No, I don't think so at all. I think it would be a positive if they do go earlier, as I mentioned, but we don't need the Fed because the economy is hanging in just fine. We're running 2.5% GDP growth, Scott. At the same time, inflation has come down. And oh, by the way, this move in oil, we just had a 26% move in oil prices in crude, right, since May. Now you're seeing a pullback. That will also be good for inflation and input costs, as Adam mentioned.
One day doesn't a trend make, though. I mean, let's be honest, right? It's moving lower today in reaction to what happened over there. You can't make any declarative statement that, well, now oil's moving lower again, so that's going to be great for everything. We just don't know that.
I think it's going to move down. I think it's going to move lower because I think we have a lot of supply out there, a lot of excess supply. And we have producers that here in the United States are producing still a lot. And so I think, if anything, the U.S. players are going to gain market share over this whole thing. But I do think oil prices are capped here. I think they go lower.
Look, last time when we had inflation after COVID, we were running, what, 9% nominal GDP? So I think the difference this time is, demand won't cause. We had both the supply problem of shutdowns during COVID, and we gave people helicopter money, so demand was awesome. So you had prices go up from both sides. I think the consumer, as Steph points out, in decent, slightly eroding, but decent shape.
You've hated the consumer trade for as long as we've been having conversations.
Yeah, it's been our biggest underweight, and it's been the worst performing sector. That's called a good call. Thanks for pointing that out. Appreciate that. I think the question is, do we upgrade it in anticipation of the Fed or not? Yeah. Does the Fed cause a rotation? And my bias is yes. I totally hear Cameron on the housing call. They've been bad. I'm just saying, would there be a short-term trade on that rotation? But yeah, the challenge is this home prices are still too high, and the 30-year fixed hasn't come down the same way the 30-year yield is. There's that lag. So I still think housing isn't great. I just think there could be a short-term trade if they do it.
I just watched that $68 on WTI. If we start to carve out a potential bottom in crude, I completely agree with Steph that you saw the overbought condition.
Sí, el petróleo se cayó. Hicimos una pequeña entrada en miren. Compré hace rato, usados frecuentemente, ERX en 50. Y eso y ni tanto hace rato, porque fue hace apenas, o sea, Sí, hace como una hora, justo. Y eso y una pequeña entrada son 10 títulos nada más. Así que, nada grave. Mm, Ahorita también lo que andamos es con el hype de
Because we're a
Tesla.
car company, buy Tesla because we're a tech company. Now, this puts pressure on Tesla to show that they can compete with Waymo and the
Vamos a ver este.
Chinese on full self-driving. They need to get permitted and regulatory approval in more cities, and they need to show they can generate some revenue to keep up with what Waymo's doing.
If they can get the permitting and they can continue to grow the robo-taxi fleet, will that be seen as enough turnaround for Tesla investors, do you think?
Well, it depends how much. So, look, Waymo's got regulatory approval. San Francisco, LA, Phoenix.
Qué diferencia.
They've got Austin, Atlanta, and now New York City all in the pipeline. Waymo's already providing 250,000 rides a week, 1 million a month. Tesla doesn't have regulatory approval anywhere yet, and is about 2 years late in launching in Austin. So the key metric to look at for robo-taxis is Waymo goes about 10,000 miles between critical disengagement. That means a dangerous situation where it just pulls over and stops the car. Tesla's only going about 400. So they've really got to fix that issue. Growing concern for shareholders is that Chinese AV companies are also coming ahead, could be ahead of both. So investors need to understand this is a global marketplace. Competition's coming. Tesla's been king of the hill, but they're going to have to ramp it up a notch to keep up with competition.
So after the event, I've been following Tesla all day long. I've seen a couple videos of some potential traffic violations with the robo-taxis, one where a car stopped when there was nothing in its driving path, just slammed the brakes on. Another where it was going the wrong way down a one-way street. Are things like this going to stay common? You think these are one-offs? Are they going to affect them getting the approvals? Or was this expected because these were already concerns we were seeing with Tesla?
No, this is going to worry people. When you look at this, it just doesn't look anything like the Waymos you'd see in San Francisco, Los Angeles, or Phoenix. They've got a driver in the seat. They're still hitting stuff. You can't do that. And what could happen here is more and more regulators may just hit the pause button and say, you're just not ready. This is a global race. The Chinese in particular are going like crazy. Again, Waymo is already moving forward in 10 different cities, not just in the US, but moving forward in Tokyo as well, in the most complex city environments in the world. So Tesla's not only got to nail Austin, then they've got to show what their plan is. They've got to stop hitting stuff. There's going to be a lot of demands to make safety data public. So, Tesla's got a lot to juggle, but ultimately, I think Tesla is going to be a flat to down year in auto sales. Investors are going to want to see more full self-driving, more progress on humanoid robots, more progress on their energy division. They've got to sell the story. They're not just a car company. They are a tech company.
And we keep talking about China and their AV leaders. Who are the AV leaders and how good are they? How superior are they even to Tesla right now?
So, well, first, their electric EVs dramatically cheaper. Selling cars, BYD has a spiffy model, $9,000 Seagull. I mean, this is tough to keep up with. But there are three companies that appear to be the leaders, BYD, Pony AI, and a firm called WeRide. They've all gotten regulatory approval. They're all doing testing around China. Now, they don't publish safety data like they do in the US, so it's kind of hard to tell. But the writers and analysts who've driven in them say they appear to be just as good at Waymo. WeRide, just one data point, has regulatory approval in 30 Chinese cities. Now, the standards may not be as high there because the government wants Chinese autonomous vehicle companies to win. So they're giving them, I think, a little more latitude than you might see in the US, which is more of a safety first culture. But the point is, there's global competition. Waymo appears to have the lead. Chinese coming on quickly. Tesla's got some ground to keep up. Let's see how well they do over the next 6 months. But if they don't get car sales up and more cities approval, they're going to have some explaining to do.
And one of the really important components to both the approval process and also the capabilities of the vehicles, some of which the Chinese AVs are saying, is this level 4 technology versus level 3 technology. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for our viewers?
Well, you bet. There's certain standards. Level 3 is full self-driving. A lot of Tesla owners, including myself, have it. It drives pretty well. But level 4 is really where you can take your hands off the wheel for an extended period of time, where you no longer need to have a driver in the driver's seat. I think a lot of people were hoping that in Austin, because it's in such a small geo-fenced area, nothing like what Waymo is doing in Los Angeles or San Francisco, where you can go anywhere in the city, that they would be able to take the driver out of the car at this point. Not quite ready to do that. That's where you hit level 4. So again, people are looking to see 2 things with Tesla. 1, can you get the driver out of the car altogether? 2, how quickly can they get regulatory approval in multiple cities and move beyond just a geo-fenced area to serving the full city?
How quickly, reasonably, do you think they can achieve that goal to maintain the surge that we're seeing, this positive momentum?
Well, see, therein lies the challenge, because what has typically happened with Waymo is they would have employees only for 6 months just to see how it would work in case there were any problems. It takes a while to do this. There's a lot of imponderables, people, stumbling off sidewalks into a street, bicycle deliverers. You've got to be really careful with this stuff. You can't force the technology. It takes multiple months, 6 to 12, and then regulators have to come in and see if it passes the sniff test. Now, there's a little bit of drama in the last week before the big announcement in Austin. 7 Texas legislators wrote a letter saying, we don't think you're ready. We'd like you to come back in September. Tesla went ahead and did the trial yesterday. I think it looked pretty good, but again, still had to have that driver in the front seat. They got to get beyond that and do that quickly. Others are moving fast.
So a lot of potential speed bumps or roadblocks for our auto humor here. Realistically, are you bullish or bearish on Tesla?
So I served on the board of Tesla. You never want to bet against Tesla or Elon Musk. It's an extraordinary company. But I think it's fair to say they have fallen behind in a number of areas. Don't take my word for it. Look at the auto sales this year. They've got some ground to keep up, to make up. And if you're going to sell Tesla or Tesla stock as a tech company, then you really need to have some concrete deliverables for full self-driving humanoid robots and so on. The good news is they've been an absolute leader in their energy division. That'll be at least 10 billion, I think 14 billion this year. That'll give them some extra latitude, but they've got to get into a higher gear. I hope they're successful. I want to see American companies win, but they've got some ground to cover.
Incredible insight. Thank you, Steve Wesley, the founder and managing partner of the Wesley Group. Now, coming up, we've got Options Corner heading your way with Kevin Green. He'll join us with the levels to watch as we go into the close. We're back right after this.
Ok. Bien, siguen hablando de Tesla. La fiebre continúa.
Recent weeks, what we heard from Oracle, what we heard from Broadcom, I think affirms that thesis very much.
I mean, you've been a keep it simple, keep your eye on the prize kind of thought about this market. That doesn't sound like it's changing at all. I mean, are you ready to declare a broadening a bunch more winners than you might have thought?
I'd say my highest level of conviction still resides in the tech space and then kind of like the attendant power theme. So I'd keep my eye on those 2 themes very much. You know, this question of the broadening or not, I find it a little interesting. Within large cap, things have been pretty broad. I think there's 11 headline sectors of S&P 500. 9 of them are up on the year. So I'm a continued believer in S&P 500. I'm much less of a believer in small cap.
When you assess what's happening in the Middle East, as I said, no market participant here is going to be a geopolitical expert, but you're thinking about scenarios in which you'd be more or less bullish. If what we saw today in the response by Iran is the bulk of their response, at least from a military standpoint, you take from that and you mean what?
So I would level set it again in crude oil, which is my North Star.
So whatever crude does is you're going to decide what you think equities do?
I think locally that's going to set the tone for risk. And so our view going into the weekend was Brent crude oil was going to $60 by the end of this year and into the mid-50s next year. We have not revised that forecast. So that should be, again, short-term a good backdrop for risk. I think the bigger picture is we still think it's a bull market. We think U.S. growth holds up and gets back to trend next year, plus 7% earnings growth this year, plus 7% next year. As earnings goes, typically, as we know, so goes the market. And so we've got S&P going to 6,500 out 12 months. I think that's a reasonable base case.
Earnings have to be good, though, to justify the valuation of where we are today.
I think earnings are going to have to do the heavy lifting.
And they will?
Yes. I think so. And again, I go back to the first quarter, which is old news, but it sets a tone and a trajectory for the second quarter. And I'll go back to the Magnificent Seven. Year-on-year earnings growth was plus 32%. The rest of the index are very respectable, plus 8%. But I think corporate America retained a lot of momentum through all the ups and downs of the first quarter. It's going to be a show-me story, but I think you're supposed to bet more on the right tail than the left tail.
Even with front-running and front-loading and all of that, which might have skewed a little bit of the picture?
Yeah, so you're right, which is, by the way, U.S. economic growth will probably slow over the second half of the year as some of the front-loaded effects finally bleed out. Set against that, you still have U.S. fiscal spending. For all the talk of Doge, you still have U.S. fiscal spending up 7-8% on the year and a tremendous amount of capital still flowing into the AI CapEx build.
And rate cuts real quick? What do you think?
So we don't necessarily see them. I'm not sure the market needs them right now. Again, if I use my client trip last week as a litmus test, it's kind of conspicuous in its absence how little people are talking about or depending on the Fed right now. They're very much in the back seat. So I don't think it's a necessary condition for the market to grind higher from here.
All right. We'll see you soon. Tony, thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Goldman's Tony Pasquarello back at Post 9 with us. Up next, Maryland Bank of America's private bank, Chris Heisey. He's mapping out his mid-year outlook. He'll tell you what it is next.
It is my honor to welcome the hardest working software on television to the public market.
And there have been 3 chapters in the company's life. This one is the one I'm most excited about.
It's a smart move to get a second opinion. You do it when you're looking for a contractor. You definitely do it with medical advice. So why not with your stock market investments? We can help you see opportunities you may be missing. At Henyon & Walsh, it only takes a second to schedule your free second opinion. So what's there to lose? Speak to Henyon & Walsh, the second opinion people.
My name is Mike Hammond, founder of Signal Relief. Much of my career has been working in construction. I love outdoors and horses. That active lifestyle is what has caused my body to hurt. I didn't want to let this affect my family or my life, and that's what motivated me to create a team to build the Signal Relief Patch, clinically proven to reduce the impact of pain. The patch is a game changer. No creams, no pills, no wires. The patch is reusable, and there's a real money-back guarantee. Whether it's your neck, back, knee, shoulder, or just aches and pains, this patch can give you your life back. When I gave my best friend a patch with tears in his eyes, he said it was the first time in 16 years he did not hurt. Join the hundreds of thousands who found relief. I'm asking you to try the Signal Relief Patch today by going to our website. If you're thinking about buying, it means you need one. You have nothing to lose. I promise the patch works.
New projects means
I
new
don't
projects.
think so, man. Vamos a checar esto.
Had over the last couple of trading sessions here. So I think that's also a positive. And if we go to the daily chart, we tested the 20-day moving average here today. That was sitting at around 59.66. We have a nice hammer candle today. We also have a bullish engulfing candle. If we can close at these highs for today, that's actually, once again, all bullish. We have the key technical support areas really holding up. You have some buyers really showing up towards the end of today's session. And if you do see some follow through, that could also lead to maybe a couple of days of green on the screen, given the fact that geopolitical risk events could be taken off the risk radar.
Nada de guerra, nada
And then
de
also, if you're hearing some of the comments,
que la Tercera Guerra Mundial, esas tonterías, nada de eso. La frase entre comillas, la bolsa no tiene corazón. Tristemente así es. A ver, ya es una 35, en 25 cerramos. Hicimos compras, sí. Ups. A ver. Wait, aquí está. Ok. En lo que busco mi lista de compras, porque tengo que registrar todas las ventas y compras del día, dejo las noticias.
In volume, just in general, when we have risk events like the one that we experienced here today, it's not only when you're looking at the options, but also the futures contracts. The bid-ask sizes actually do come in a tad bit here. But if you're looking at the total up minus down volume for the S&P 500 composite, it's still actually pretty healthy for today. So once again, a little bit of a backfill on the equity front. And that's also because of the mixture of sectors that have been performing today. When we started off today's session, it was very defensive. You saw consumer staples, energy doing fairly well, real estate also doing well. But now as you're getting to the close, you start seeing consumer discretionary outperforming. That's being helped by Tesla. Start seeing technology and communication services starting to help out as well. Those are usually your big volume drivers when you're looking at the sectors. And so that actually gives you, once again, a little bit more of a risk on tone. We also hit a pretty key area of support when it comes to the 10-year treasury as well. So we'll keep that one on the radar. But the volume overall for today actually looks pretty decent. You like the composition when it comes to the sectors. You have some technical areas where, once again, they're kind of holding up. This kind of looks like, barring anything that has happened in the next 24 hours on the news front, an environment where maybe some bulls can actually see some follow through over the next couple of days.
If I had any wood on this desk, I'd be knocking on it right now, Kevin. So I'm just going to knock on the plastic surface. We'll have you back a little bit later in the show, but thanks for that, Kevin Green. And coming up, we'll take a look at commodities next as crude oil gave back some of its weekend gains following the continued tension in the Middle East. Market on close. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Believe me, when it comes to investing, you'll love Carl's way. Take a left here, please.
But there's a...
Carl's...
Bitcoin resurgiendo. No de las cenizas, porque pues 98,000 es considerable, pero $90,000 sería así como preocupante, ¿no? Como de qué óvole. Pero ya si estuviera en estos niveles, pues no sería tampoco tan grave, ¿verdad? Ethereum. Miren, qué bonito, ahí va. Hermoso. Bellísimo. Tesla. Ya cayéndose, corrigiéndose después de la... Bueno, ni corrigiéndose, ¿eh? O sea, está estabilizándose luego de del tremendo rally que tuvo del robotaxi. Desde China para acá tenemos un rally impresionante, con más del 30% de rendimiento. Bueno, no, sería 28, 29. ¿Vale? ¿Qué más? A ver, mis compras. Seguimos holdeando Palantir, Enphase Energy, Tesla, por supuesto. United Health se vendió, pero chéquense esto. Chéquense la hermosura de United Health. Aquí está. Tocó los de $295. El precio se retrasó y nos dieron 297. No hay bronca, pero fue como de, ok, va, 297. Estamos hablando que casi invertimos 85,000, 90,000 pesos en United Health. Claro, a 3 meses, o sea, siempre les digo 3 meses, pero cuando se hizo el movimiento de comprar aquí en los 255, que fue una ganga que pues pasan pocas veces, ¿saben? O sea, no siempre se va a repetir eso. ¿Qué pasó? ¿Por qué se frena esto? No, pues quién sabe. Mi compu se traba horrible, o sea, pero bueno. Lo que les quería decir es que vean esto. O sea, se compraron aquí el, ¿qué? 16 de mayo. Nos tuvimos que esperar solo hasta aquí. Hasta aquí, o sea, imagínense. 312 fue el precio de venta, o sea, una maravilla. Maravilla. Espérense. A ver, aguántenme, porque... no manches, vean esto. A ver, espérense, no, espérense. Sí, claro, era lo que estaba viendo. O sea, se cayó a los 121, pero ahí va. Cabo es una empresa especial, de hecho, inclusive yo creo que sería bueno si nos quedamos hoy. Planeo quedarme hasta las 3 porque tengo una urgencia de sacar unos precios intrínsecos para la estrategia de este mes, o sea, de julio, vamos. Entonces, hay que sacar precios intrínsecos y tomar. Algunas ya se compraron, ojo, o sea, se han comprado porque el análisis técnico ha sido bueno, pero, pues para comparar más, tener la seguridad de que esas acciones son buenas, son saludables, a largo plazo, pues es una investigación minuciosa, ¿saben? Entonces, pues estamos en eso. Vamos a checar aquí qué onda.
Word that Iran did launch a retaliatory attack, despite there being no casualties. I assumed we would see movement in the opposing direction and that we would spend a lot of our time talking about that potential worst case scenario of the closing, since a part of the Iranian government did back closing the Strait of Hormuz and potentially seeing that 120, 130 a barrel that JP Morgan Oil is reporting. Do you think there's any shot we get there?
There's always a shot for something to happen. This would really have to escalate. I'd be very, very careful right now on the short. And I have been a sell first in crude, sell first position for months and months and months. I mean, we've talked about it ad nauseum. Now, though, is the time I think you have to be very, very careful. This is almost as if, this was a buy the rumor, sell the news type of event. But listen, things are not over, right? This escalation or continuance of what we have, it's still there. So I'd be very, very careful. Are we going to see 100 or 120? I don't know. I think a move like today shows the world that, maybe demand isn't there, or there is enough supply, or a combination. However, the geopolitical event risk is still there.
And do you think, with that concern, do we have any concerns that we have to be prepared for a hike at the pump? I know that even if they close the strait, it's not as large of a concern for the United States, but overall, the global oil economy can affect us as well.
Yes, I think we absolutely need to be concerned. But again, if you bring in the fundamentals of supply and demand, it sure seems like, boy, there is ample supply, and that any risk would be that geopolitical risk. So I think we can see higher prices. In fact, I don't remember the last summer that we've seen prices where they are right now. I mean, summer we typically see a big bump up in prices. So are we going to see $100, $120 a barrel? I don't think we are, but I wouldn't say no, it's absolutely not going to happen.
También.
All right, now let's move into our metals. I'm looking at our
Tenemos que hacer el análisis semanal de esta semana que pasó. Se me pasó, o sea, horrible. Error garrafal. Aunque hay buenas cosas. Pero sí, o sea, es un compromiso que tengo personal conmigo mismo. Okay. Gold continues to trade.
I don't know if you saw that the Bank of America said that it thinks that the metal could reach $4,000 an ounce over the next year, despite all of the conflicts heating up, Israel, Iran, everything going on. The outlook, they're saying they think is going to be swayed more by the U.S. budget deficit. Do you think that merits a I guess, close to 18% jump from where we currently are?
I was just going to say that's about a 17, 18% jump. I think that's really, really aggressive. I kind of do agree with them that this is more about risk here with the budget, with the dollar perhaps, than it is maybe with geopolitical events. But boy, that is an incredible move. But I guess, if I were to play the Monday morning quarterback in hindsight, you look to see the move that we've already have, no one would have believed it. So I don't put that out of the realm of possibility, but that would not be my base case.
And I know you said that you've been avoiding shorting. And as I was just looking at that chart, we didn't break below that pivot point of like 33.10-ish. Do you think that triggered some short covering that gave gold some of that lift today?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. There's a little bit heightened tensions out there, and I think some of those shorts in this case probably ran to cover maybe a little bit early, but just the fact that we didn't see it break through there, that was pretty significant.
And as far as gold, what level are you specifically keeping an eye on?
Están hablando de qué es lo que keep an eye on, o sea, qué mantienen en la vista, o sea, qué están observando. Lo que yo estoy viendo ahorita es que Petén ha tenido dos comportamientos extraños. Petén es una energética. Sí, es un poco de energía renovable, sí, pero vean este comportamiento. O sea, en China alcanzó 6.90, recientemente días atrás también alcanzó 6.99. O sea, algo la está haciendo subir. Sería cuestión de investigar qué, pero no sería mal una pequeña entrada. O sea, hablamos de 120 pesos por acción. O sea, la realidad es que es muy poco dinero para una acción. Y aparte el consenso de Petén, interesantemente, es que al menos debe de costar $7. Mínimo tiene que costar eso. Entonces, si está en 6, pues la verdad es que sí está, siempre se me olvida esta palabra, sobrevaluada, valuada debajo de su valor real, pero sobre el sinónimo, a ver, vamos a buscarlo. El sinónimo de sobrevaluada. Sinónimo sobrevaluada. Como Tesla está sobrevaluada. Entonces, sería infravalorada. Sobrevaluada, infravalorada. Sí, está infravalorada por $1. Entonces, ¿qué estoy esperando? Que marque su piso, que comience a marcar un piso, véanlo a un minuto. O sea, y nomás no, o sea, va en escalera recta hacia abajo. O sea, literalmente, pues sí, va bajando y la verdad es que no es agradable, pero pues, vean, ahí va. Entonces no sería mal, vean, inclusive ha hecho este comportamiento lateral y cae. Intenta subir y vuelve a caer. Entonces, sería cuestión de checarle este negocio lo chequé hace como 3 años. No es mala la empresa. Simplemente pues está en el contexto equivocado. Genial, ya hay ganancias, pero mejor esperemos. Hay que checar para el análisis semanal, también tengo que checar eso. Es que, se los juro, hay un buen de cosas que hacer. Incluso aquí en mi libreta tengo todo anotado de todo lo que tengo que hacer. También tengo pendiente ir a hacer ejercicio. Entonces tengo que checar también, porque se supone que el clima va a llover a las 4 o 5. Entonces vamos a checar. Ahora me dice que hasta las 6 va a llover. Entonces sí, pues en efecto me puedo quedar hasta las 3, incluso 4 dependiendo del movimiento de la lluvia. Porque va a comenzar a 5:30, 6 y ya en la tarde digamos que se va a soltar el agua. Entonces, pues así. A ver, acá. Aquí. Aquí. Listo. Bien. Entonces, por aquí. ¿Y si se actualiza, servirá? Sí, pero no es lo que queremos ver. Pero bueno. Entonces, miren, o sea, el tema es Petén. ¿Qué está pasando con Petén? A ver. Ah, mm, tengo que irme para acá. Tenemos que checar en cuánto va a cerrar, porque faltan 9 minutos para el cierre de bolsa. Lo que voy a ver es checar el índice de Miercoles y estamos en 55. Chéquense esto. El viernes cerramos en 55 el índice de Miercoles de la CNN. Hoy, miren, ya cambió a 56. Maravilloso. ¿Por qué? Porque estamos haciendo compras al alza. Entonces, si el mercado se torna positivo esta semana, pues qué mejor. Ahora, señales de debilidad serán las siguientes. Posible represalia de Irán a Estados Unidos, que no creemos, sería un error garrafal, que Irán, siendo un cachorrito, un chihuahua, atacara a un oso, y eso sería más toro por el mercado, pero un león, digamos, que atacara a un león. Entonces imagínense cómo le iría, ¿no? Tenemos eso. Esta semana el Banco de México es la junta de nuestro Banco Nacional, del Banco Nacional de México, Banxico. Entonces, lo ideal, yo espero que mantengan la tasa de interés, que no la muevan, pero muchos apuntan a que la van a bajar punto 25 puntos base. Entonces, pues, está por verse. Si hacen eso, pues todas las tasas van a comenzar a disminuir, pero pues, así es esto. Recuerden que si invierten en el Mercado Libre o Nubank, les acepta un máximo de 23,000 pesos para su 15% anual. Entonces, pues ya. Vamos aquí. Ok. Listo. ¿Qué pasó? ¿Qué pasó? ¿Qué decía? Ajá, ok. Ok, se mantiene todavía. Y pues listo, ya está. Ahora, una empresa muy importante que le estoy echando el ojo es esta de aquí. Parece que se está consolidando el gráfico, pero bueno. Veamos esto porque la bolsa ya va a cerrar.
We do still think we can see cuts later this year. Our camp has been more September at the earliest, so September and maybe sometime after that. I don't think there's much that we'd see over the next few weeks that would shift enough committee members to all get on board for a cut. We have seen some positive developments on the inflation front over the past few months. I mean, if we look at CPI specifically, 3 out of the past 4 months have been, I think, 0.2% or less at the core level. That's very, very encouraging. This Friday, we're going to get PCE. That's something that the Fed focuses on much more closely. If we were to get a very encouraging report there, it would be a step in the right direction, but I get the idea that there's just so much uncertainty about the impact of tariffs and what that might mean down the road that I think most officials would be a bit hesitant to cut. Now, Austin Goolsbee, he was one of the speakers today. He talked about that idea that there is uncertainty, but if we saw a nice positive inflation print, then he himself could see a cut in July. I just don't think there's enough of a consensus around that given all the uncertainty.
Absolutely. I mean, it's certainly one of the widest spread dispersions we've ever seen in terms of how the votes all laid out. Now, I do want to ask about the bond market's geopolitical response to everything that's going on. You know, the commentary from the Fed, very important. But how do you think that the market has responded to all of the issues going on in Iran and Israel?
The market generally responded with a yawn, and I found that a bit surprising. I mean, it makes sense now in that what we got as the day progressed was, some sort of response from Iran, but it was not as bad as maybe was feared. So that's a step in the right direction. But even prior to that, the markets, the bond markets, treasury yields were really well behaved. And it showed that maybe they were, bond investors were expecting this sort of, mitigated response from Iran. That's a good thing. But it was a bit surprising that you had the potential for, inflation to increase if we saw some big moves with oil prices for a sustained period of time. Also, the idea of a protracted, standoff with these countries, usually that results in some sort of safe haven bid for U.S. Treasuries, which pulls their yields lower. We really got none of that. So we were a bit surprised by that. But at the end of the day, the drop in yields, along with the comments from Fed officials and the idea that maybe the retaliation wasn't that bad, that does make sense to us.
The credit market also seemed to have a more yawn-like reaction to the uncertainty. Do you think that they also expected it and had it priced in?
I don't know what they were expecting, but the credit markets and credit market investors remain resilient. I mean, that's a key theme that we've been focusing on for the past really handful of years now, whether it's investment grade corporate bonds, high yield corporate.
It's not that they've started a robo-taxi service. It's whether or not they can ramp up as quickly as many believe they have to in order to catch up with Waymo and other competitors who will be out there. By the way, UBS raising its price target on Tesla today to $215 from $190. And as you take a look at shares of Tesla over the last year, keep this in mind, Scott. Next week is when we get Q2 deliveries. That is a data point that you don't need it.
Versus the dream of what Elon Musk really wants this company to be, and that tension meets, and we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. Yeah, and look, he has said, Optimus and autonomous, those are the future for Tesla.
Yeah, Phil, thanks. Phil LeBeau. All right, Diana, tell us about KB. What to look out for?
Well, Scott, KB is the second builder to report after Lennar's mixed report last week. KB had already reduced its full-year revenue guidance in its Q1 results back in March as it noted, quote, muted sales. CEO Jeff Metzger said in that report, consumers are working through affordability concerns and uncertainties related to macroeconomic and geopolitical issues, which are causing them to move slowly in their home buying decisions. Has that changed? We'll see. In that report, though, the company also decreased its average selling price and margin expectations. We'll be watching to see if they continue to drop prices as the supply of newly built homes is pretty heavy right now. KB is on the lower end of the price ranges, so that could help. Mortgage rates, though, were rough during the quarter, shooting over 7% in April and settling into this very narrow range, right around 7% in May and still around there now. We'll see if KB got any boost from markets settling in May and this new normal in mortgage rates, Scott.
All right, Diana Olick, thank you very much. We'll see you in OT when those numbers hit. This housing market needs some sort of something, some
no doubt about it. It's probably kind of exhibit A or B in the dovish case for why the Fed should be leaning toward cutting rates sooner than not. Now, we don't really know what happens to long-term rates and mortgage rates if, in fact, we go 25 or 50 basis points lower on the short end. But there's no doubt that that is a restraint on overall growth. It's a restraint. Residential investment, residential construction is not really carrying the load for the economy right now. So you put that in kind of one category. On the other side, obviously, the AI theme kind of has no quit. What I'm interested in, though, is the way the market has decided to just get so frisky about these things. I mean, you have all these new...
Only on Schwab Network.
Up 8% on honestly really not much of anything new. You have Circle today, up huge again, a recent IPO. It's up massively in a few weeks. Now, Circle's the new CoreWeave. CoreWeave was the new Supermicro. Supermicro was the new NVIDIA. So we just kind of keep finding new ways to get speculative, overexcited in the short term. I was talking last week about how that can be kind of an erratic flow into the market, but for now, it's helping. It's actually keeping people interested, and it's keeping it hard to be short or bearish on certain parts of this market. So I think when we came back to within 3% of the all-time highs, that happened a couple of weeks ago, it was very, very plausible, in fact, very probable that eventually within weeks you're going to probably make a run at those highs. We're still in that situation right now, kind of within striking distance, and it took a scare. It took the tariff scare to kind of pull back the slingshot and get us higher. Maybe it takes another geopolitical scare as we got to sort of, again, create that shakeout recoil effect, and we'll see if that's enough. But, you know, we've just noticed in one day how quickly the story can change and how quickly we can sort of reinterpret the same events in a more positive or negative way.
Yeah, well, the market's not going to take its eye for any reason off of the Middle East to see if, you know, this was it. And see what happens to the oil market. Obviously, oil falling sharply today helped the overall picture because we're going to go out pretty much at the highs of the day. Dow's pushing 400.
Yeah, this is definitely the highs.
Yeah, you're going to go 60, 25 on the S&P. Good for 57 or so points there. So we'll watch all of that. We'll send you into overtime with the bell ringing, and we'll see you on the other side tomorrow.
Listo.
In the last 48 hours, the last two trading sessions, that could give bulls a little bit more confidence that they can actually make this S&P 500 get to the all-time highs here.
All right, you've got so many things in there that I want to talk to you about. So the one that sticks out the most, obviously, I just talked to Scott Bauer about how surprised everybody on the floor was about crude oil and its behavior today, closing down about 7%. We're 68.72 a barrel right now. Are you surprised by that reaction that we fell so far off of those highs that we touched?
Yeah, see, that is not a surprise. So what we did see during the run-up, obviously a lot of speculators buying into the geopolitical risk, the concerns around the Strait of Hormuz being blocked, but you actually did not see that on the ground. You still saw transit to and from that strait. You did see some readjustments when it came to tankers kind of going around and going alternative routes, which is fine. But you did not see that escalation there. I think that was one area. Two, when you're looking at the strikes between Israel and Iran, a lot of the energy infrastructure
15
was
missiles
actually
fired,
domestic based.
13 were knocked down, one was set free, and the president says he's pleased to report that no Americans were harmed and hardly any damage was done. Most importantly, he says they've gotten it all out of their system, and there will hopefully be no further hate. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost and nobody to be injured. Perhaps Iran can now proceed to peace and harmony in the region, and I will enthusiastically encourage Israel to do the same. So guys, a few things to pull out of that specifically. One, of course, we had heard this.
O sea, está diciendo que la respuesta de Irán después de los ataques estadounidenses fue como muy precaria. Digamos que esperaba más, pero también es un acto de poder y de soberbia. Pues de Estados Unidos, que esperamos. Pero pues así la situación, ¿no? Está bien, no pasa nada. Que allá afuera se destruyan, incluso aquí en Estados Unidos. Pero pues mientras los mercados pues siguen. El capitalismo no se detiene.
The way that has been framed in reporting, especially by the New York Times and others, is that the Iranians needed a way to symbolically respond or retaliate to Saturday's attacks, but that they wanted to do it in some way that gave both sides an off-ramp or an exit ramp. So with the president confirming that now and suggesting that he wants to now proceed to peace and harmony in the region, it does raise the question of whether all of these parties, the U.S., Israel, and Iran, might be able now to get to the negotiating table to work on some sort of diplomatic solution. The White House was saying earlier today that is still their goal. That's what we have to wait and see if that comes next.
Okay.
Guys.
Megan Casella, thank you. And of course, that perhaps speaks to why we saw crude oil plunge today and we saw stocks closing here right at session highs, this idea of an off-ramp. So let's get some perspective on this evolving situation from one of the few people who actually understand exactly what it's like to be in the room, the Situation Room, during these key discussions. Joining us now is Mark Esper, former Secretary of Defense. Secretary, it's great to have you back on the show and to get your insights here. Welcome.
Yeah, good afternoon, Morgan.
So that's where I want to start with you. Yes, we saw this strike, a very weak response, as President Trump just indicated there, and a response that apparently the U.S. as well as the Qataris expected or got some sort of heads up on. Does this, in fact, provide an off-ramp for retaliation by Iran?
I think this is probably the end of the United States directly attacking Iran again. It provides enough of an off-ramp. The Iranians are going to message domestically that they fired 14 missiles. There is some reporting that they are already telling the Iranian people that 6 impacted and had effects. Meanwhile, of course, we know that it was calibrated to have no impact whatsoever. So right now it seems we're in a position, and President Trump even said as much, that this, as far as he's concerned, he thinks all parties need to move to, a peaceful settlement. And interestingly, in that his final line there, he said he would encourage Israel to do the same, which I thought was interesting as well.
Do you think Israel is close to finished with its own war on Iran, or hard to tell?
Well, they said that they are close to accomplishing the majority of their objectives, which I assume was to dismantle, obviously, Iran's nuclear infrastructure, but also its ballistic missiles, its launchers, its Air Force, the small and weak Air Force that they had, and then really the defense industrial complex that supported those elements. Now, there may be some other things out there. There are probably more they can go after, but I suspect we are days away. To me, the challenge is going to be, how do they maintain the pressure on Iran while at the same time pushing hard terms, different terms of what Iran is probably expecting when it comes to some type of settlement on the way forward?
Secretary, I see how a weakened Iran is certainly at the advantage of the United States and its allies on the face of it. But I also wonder if there's a power void left from Iran's point of view and its proxy's point of view in the Middle East, as they have been so significantly weakened over the past couple of years, and if something else to be concerned about potentially fills that void.
Look, it's a good question, but it's hard to see what that void would be, because it has been for 6 years now. Iran has been sponsoring all the terror groups throughout the region: Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, most recently Shia militia groups. And so the power void would be actually, hopefully, an absence of conflict and terrorism and threats coming out of one country that was intimidating its neighbors, particularly the Arab states, Israel, and the United States. So, look, we could end up, if this is played well, in a far better situation, but only time will tell. Again, to me, the negotiations coming up are going to be difficult. They're going to be tough, because what we're going to need to have is some type of enduring presence in that country, surveillance of their nuclear infrastructure, and of course, immediately, we need to find out where those missing 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium is located and get that under control as well.
Do you expect Iran to allow us to find that out?
I don't know, honestly. They've proven to be quite intransigent, even up until the bombing of Fordow. Even today, they are striking back at Israel. We'll see if they've come to the recognition that if they don't step back, if they don't swallow their pride a little bit, this could continue to get really bad for them and their country dismantled. We see today that Israel's now targeting what they call symbols of Iranian oppression, right? Evin Prison, places like that, where pointing out to the Iranian people that they don't need to live under this terrorist regime, that there is a better life out there. And I assume they're trying to provoke the Iranian people to rise up. We'll see. But look, this is where it's going to get tough, the negotiation, to see whether Iran will actually agree. And the first question will be, will they agree to talk even while Israel retains a presence over their skies to put pressure on them?
The current Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, basically said over the weekend, deterrence has been reestablished, U.S. deterrence. Obviously a very secretive, but also very complicated, complex, and very successful by a number of metrics mission that was conducted here with Operation Midnight Hammer. How does it speak to technological prowess of the U.S. military, and how does it now set the stage for this NATO summit where member countries are expected to boost their spending to as much as 5% of GDP?
Yeah, look, there are two principal components to deterrence. One is capability, and the second is will. And I don't think anybody doubts our capability. And we once again proved that we have the capability to enter enemy airspace and bomb them and leave them without being attacked or even known. And that shows our capability. But I think importantly, it shows that President Trump has the will to conduct such operations when America's interests are at stake. So I think it does improve deterrence in that regard. With regard to NATO, we're already hearing out of NATO that the allies have agreed to 5%, although there seems to be some backsliding on countries like Spain. I am not happy by reports that they are going to achieve 5% of GDP toward defense by 2035. That's just ridiculous. It's way too long. We need them to increase spending dramatically. We're already years behind, and the Russian threat is going to continue to grow. In fact, we had the NATO Secretary General say not long ago that they think Russia could rearm and be prepared to go after NATO partners by 2030. So clearly the timelines need to get aligned and adjusted.
So we're talking about the possibility perhaps here for an off-ramp for kinetic strikes and retaliation by Iran, but how to assess other risks where Iran is concerned, whether it's from a cyber threat standpoint, or we've heard about sleeper cells, the possibility of hate crimes or domestic terrorism, or even Iran targeting individuals. And I ask this knowing that at least until recently, you had a full security detail because of those issues.
Yeah, look, I think those are all important considerations that I assume at some point will be discussed. They are far more challenging to go after. We obviously have a great law enforcement presence here in the United States at the federal level, beginning with the FBI and heading all the way throughout the states. But those are factors we need to consider. And I know of concern to your viewers is Iran can continue to threaten the Strait of Hormuz and cut off or inhibit oil supplies. That might be something to be adjusted. My priority would have been if Iran had hit us hard enough for us to respond aggressively, would be to take out the Iranian Navy, or at least those parts of it that could really inhibit the transit in the Strait of Hormuz. But right now, that seems to not be the case.
Mark Esper, former Secretary of Defense, it's great to have you on. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Morgan.
It's a volatile session we had here on Wall Street today with the latest geopolitical developments, but stocks did close at session highs. Treasuries were lower as 3 Fed officials have begun talking about lowering interest rates as soon as July if inflation remains subdued. Let's bring in Payne Capital Management Senior Wealth Advisor and CNBC contributor Courtney Garcia, along with CNBC Senior Markets commentator Mike Santoli. Guys, good to see you. Courtney, how can investors parse this, given that we're still sort of in this tariff window where the full tariffs aren't on, we're not sure what the tariffs are going to be, and we won't really know the effects, right, in July?
Yeah, well, I think the bigger thing that markets were worried about, at least the short term here, was everything that's going on in the Middle East. And I think the big concern was if you did see some sort of closure of the Strait of Hormuz, or you saw any sort of damage to energy infrastructure, that is actually a much bigger risk that inflation's going higher from there. Because realistically, if you do see oil going above $100 a barrel, which people talk about if the Strait were to be closed, you could easily see inflation going back above 5%, and you can see the gas prices above $5 a gallon at the gas pump. If that is no longer as much of a concern, I think that's what the markets are telling you after today, when we did see some sort of response, and that was not the answer. You're seeing oil prices are coming down, which means the inflation story is actually more positive and more realistic that the Fed can lower interest rates. Because if energy prices have been coming down, which they have been over the last couple of months, that likely may offset some of the tariff impact of inflation. So that's really what markets are weighing out here, and they're more relieved to see what's going on in Iran than the upcoming tariffs at least at this point in time.
Okay. Mike, how do you understand it? Some of the language here from the Fed speak, given that we haven't yet seen what the full tariffs are going to be, let alone felt the full impact of the tariffs.
No, we haven't. And you know, Chair Powell has been pretty resolute in withholding judgment and trying to preserve this wait-and-see type stance. And I do think the majority of the committee is largely there as well. That's what, you know, the outlooks from just several days ago at the Fed decision suggested. But I think a case has built as the economic surprise indexes have weakened, as you've seen some deceleration in job growth, and as you got a couple of friendly inflation prints. I think internally the direction of travel in terms of which way to lean would be maybe to try to get easier sooner and fit in another rate cut. I don't know that that means all of a sudden July is in play, but I do recognize that there's some atmospherics around this. And it's fun because, as you said, we don't know what the final tariff terms are. We don't know how they're going to be implemented or when. And we don't know how much of that might be passed through and show up in inflation readings. I guess you have to have a theory of the case for all those things, or just say it's the Fed's job to sort of look through all of that. So it creates a sort of live debate. But from an investor's perspective, it's probably net bullish, because at least the debate now includes more of a voice on the dovish side.
Courtney, do you think a peace premium is being priced into the market here?
Well, I think after today, that's really why you're starting to see the markets are recovering here, energy prices.
Están diciendo que por qué las acciones están recuperando, que qué onda con la energía, que si hay guerra el barril va a bajar. Entonces, ¿cuál es el heads up para finales? Ya mandé mis publicaciones. A las 8 voy a hacer una sesión informativa. La siguiente fase de mi plan de expansión es la educación financiera. Los cambios comienzan por la educación. Si a la gente le interesa educarse y después de eso le interesan los mercados financieros, podemos dar el siguiente salto a la mejora de su patrimonio, con base en paciencia, perseverancia y disciplina. Básicamente eso es lo que se necesita para, pues, aportar a su cuenta de retiro, la gestión activa, los reportes mensuales, las reuniones, todo eso. Es eso. Ahorita sigue el análisis semanal. Vamos a hacerlo. Así en chinga loca. ¿Qué semana estamos empezando con los ataques de USA en Irán? Lunes, mercados amanecen a la baja, aunque BXX, volatilidad y el corto a la tecnología TEX no muestran cambios negativos, no muestran subidas considerables luego del ataque de USA a como muchos lo esperaban. Es verdad que hay una posición en volatilidad. Tengo como 25 títulos en gestión de un cliente. Entonces, cuestión. Y de hecho, hoy vendí 6 títulos. 6 títulos que se habían comprado más baratos después, porque no solo se hacen las compras de un golpe, sino primero se entra como de, ok, compra ciertos títulos, espera, sube, ok, tal vez compra otros o tal vez te esperas, incluso puede bajar más, pues compras más barato y esperas. Rendimiento esperado en 5 días, 5%. Bien, solo es un movimiento que todo el tiempo se practica, todo el tiempo se hace, es muy sencillo de hacer. Y ahí está. O sea, no se dan cursos sobre cómo hacerlo, para nada. O sea, no es mi giro andar estafando a la gente con cursos. O sea, no. O sea, y siempre lo digo, no son derivados, no son estafas. Esto es la regulación seria y profesional que da, 1, la ley del mercado de valores en México y 2, la Comisión Nacional Bancaria y de Valores. Así que así debe de ser y así es esto. Ahora, ataque de Irán y Estados Unidos. Irán, a ver, ¿no? Mercados amanecen abajo, aunque hay volatilidad. Listo. Ahora acá. Esto fue lo que pasó. Viernes. Listo. Voy a comenzarlo a poner en Facebook para... Facebook me detecta cualquier falta de ortografía y cualquier tema de ortografía, precisamente. Vamos a checarlo por acá. Hoy en el primer directo que hice así muy rápido, ¿cómo se llama? Vamos a hacerlo para acá. Mencioné todo lo que pasó el fin de semana y todo lo que se espera, aunque lo hice muy rápido porque tenía visitas de home office y ese tipo de cosas, ¿no? Wow. Qué tiempos. Pero bueno. Ok. Interesting. No quiero eso. Listo. Vamos a poner la publicación. Ahorita ya no hay nada importante. Vamos a esperar en el Ethereum. Ya cruzó mi objetivo. Excelente, magnífico. Era lo que quería. Ahora pues a seguir. O sea, aquí una excelente oportunidad de compra. Ahí va. Y acá pues solo esperemos. Esperemos un poco. Ahorita sale algo. Mientras tengo que... Creo que ya se trabo. Ah, sí, se trabo. Ok. Me pregunto si en vivo me trabo, pero no estoy seguro. También estamos a 40 minutos de terminar el directo para comer mi fruta o verdura e irme a hacer ejercicio antes de que llueva también. Batería, si tengo, bien.
The U.S. military base in Qatar. What comes next for the Middle East? Well, joining us now is Richard Haas, President Emeritus at the Council on Foreign Relations. He's also Senior Counselor with Centerview Partners. Richard, it's great to have you back on the show. Welcome. I'm going to ask you the same question I just asked Mark Esper, and that is this attack, which seems to be pretty limited and pretty well intercepted on Al Udeid in Qatar. Does this now provide an off-ramp rather than an escalation in this dynamic between the U.S. and Iran?
Absolutely. It was designed to do just that, to de-escalate. The word that comes to mind is performative. This check the box of saving face, Iran retaliated or responded. But this was designed to avoid casualties, to avoid grounds for American response or escalation. So I actually take this as a good sign, and in some ways reflects the reality that Iran has other priorities right now other than, quote unquote, getting even, which it's not in a position to do.
What would those priorities be? And how much hinges on how much of Fordow and these other nuclear sites were effectively destroyed?
They have two priorities. The most important is to consolidate the regime. It's been attacked heavily by Israel, to a lesser extent by the United States. It's been somewhat humiliating for Iran because it shows that the government cannot protect Iranian sovereign airspace. So my sense is for the foreseeable future, Iran wants to calm things down, stop attacks on it, and essentially probably look for ways to improve the Iranian economy, thinking that will placate the people. I think over the longer run, and it gets to your second question there, I think what Iran wants to do is reconstitute its nuclear weapons program. My guess is one of the lessons they will draw from the last 2 weeks is this never would have happened. Had they had a serious nuclear weapons capability, that would have deterred Israel and the United States. I'm not saying that's right, but my guess is that's their lesson. So even if the attack, say, on Fordow and Esfahan and Natanz were quote-unquote successful, that doesn't mean the United States has made all sorts of significant progress towards denuclearizing Iran. What we don't know, in addition to any bomb damage assessment, we don't know what percentage of Iranian enriched uranium or advanced centrifuges or anything else are located in warehouses and basements we have no idea about.
Richard, Israel kind of tipped its hand, Netanyahu, to wanting regime change several days ago, and President Trump has kind of implied the same. So should we believe that they're willing to put all of that aside for the sake of peace and inspections now?
No, but the problem with regime change is, one, it's a lot easier talked about than implemented. It's a wish, not a strategy. Not a lot of history on the side of those who want to bring it about. If it's going to come, you really need, I think, it to come internally for the most part. I don't see the kind of broad-based opposition you would need that's organized. I don't see the regime crumbling. The last time we brought regime change to a country in some ways was what, Iraq or Libya. And Libya turned out to be a fiasco. It's chaos. And in Iraq, you saw what it took. It took massive, prolonged intervention. And even then, it didn't work out that well. Israel's not going to be in a position to do that. Obviously, neither are we. So again, I don't take regime change all that seriously as an option for either country.
So if you start to see actions that imply that that's happening, what would those be?
I'm sorry, what happening?
That Israel and the U.S. are pushing for regime change.
Well, again, I don't think we should. I think it increases the idea that you would have all sorts of fighting with Iran. No, I think what you'll see is Israel potentially going after symbolic political targets in Iran, conceivably some economic targets, but we're not going to want them to go after economic targets. The last I checked, we don't want to necessarily drive up world oil prices. We don't want to give Iran an excuse to attack Saudi Arabia oil facilities or to do something in the Straits of Hormuz. So I actually think we're going to keep Israel pretty restrained when it comes to hurting Iran economically. So again, I don't think it's a very useful conversation to focus on regime change. If it happens, if I'm wrong and it somehow bubbles up from within, okay, then we'll deal with it. But the idea that you could call in your generals and say, hey, I want to have regime change by Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock, there's no way they can take that order and translate it into policy.
I was speaking to Roger Zakheim from the Reagan Foundation and Institute earlier today, and he raised an interesting point to me. He pointed to this emerging President Trump doctrine that basically started in Riyadh a couple of weeks ago when the president said, my preference will always be for peace and partnership whenever those outcomes can be achieved always. And sort of set, pointing out the fact that the international community perhaps took that as President Trump being pacifist or isolationist, but given the events of the weekend and with the NATO summit coming up this week, and of course the read-through to other countries across the world, that maybe the way to see this is that the U.S. will use strength, but only after an ally does its part and basically pays its fair share or contributes as well. Do you see it the same way? And if so, does that mean that the way the U.S. is approaching alliances is changing and maybe changing in a different way than everybody's been expecting them to?
I'm not sure I'm prepared to generalize on what we've seen the last few days. Seems to be pretty particular circumstances. No, I think what you're seeing is an American foreign policy that's much more unilateral and less alliance-based. We see that in Europe. We see that in Asia. You just had the cancellation of important meetings with Japan, arguably our most important ally in the world. Obviously, there's a distancing from our allies in Europe, be it over Ukraine policy or over Europe more broadly. No, I think you're seeing, again, not an isolationist America, but a more unilateral America, and probably still very careful about the use of military force.
Richard Haas.
Quiero agradecer a Irán por darnos una noticia rápida o prevista. Iceberg crude, el precio del petróleo, el bono americano. Okay.
Only modestly higher. We're going to get more into those moves when overtime comes right back.
Tengo mucha hambre.
Today is a new age.
Circle is building the foundation of our new economic system. We can raise global.
¿Qué pasó, amiguitos?
And analysts. It's all available on Schwab Network.
Hello and welcome back to Market Overtime here on Schwab Network. I'm Nicole Petalides. Crypto adoption and AI growth have been among the top market themes so far in 2025. Our guest today is a figure at the center of both industries. Let's welcome him in Mike Novogratz, founder and CEO of Galaxy. Galaxy Digital, listed on the NASDAQ and the ticker symbol GLXY. Thank you so much for being with us.
Excited to be here.
So excited to speak with you. You have such a rich history in the National Guard, a family office, Goldman Sachs, a wrestler, a competitive wrestler in college, and of course Galaxy Digital. So I'll work backwards because right now we have been in a wild time. We've had volatility. Why Galaxy? Why now? GLXY.
Well, listen, I started Galaxy. I'd been at Fortress Investments. Matter of fact, Fortress went public here on the New York Stock Exchange. It was one of the best days of my life. That was 19 years ago. So being here brought back a lot of memories. I left Fortress. I was running a family office, and I thought I'd only go back to work if I could do three things: work with young people, learn something new, and have something to offer. And even back then, I sensed that this crypto thing was going to be much bigger than most people thought. And a lot of young people. I was learning venture investing. And we thought we'd set up Galaxy as a bridge between kind of the crazy Wild West crypto world and the institution world that I'd come from, both Goldman Sachs and Fortress, really, you know, kind of core institutions. And so that's what we did. And I had this catchphrase, the herd is coming, institutions are coming. And I was way early. It took a long time for the institutions to come. But we're at this moment, literally, where institutions are here. The new administration has done a 180 on where the old administration was for crypto. And so it's unleashing lots of pent-up creativity, lots of pent-up demand, lots of pent-up energy. And we're going to see the financial architecture, both of the U.S. and abroad, and quite frankly, the consumer architecture, infrastructure change really quickly.
I think about that. I saw something when you said when crypto was selling off in a big way, you thought maybe people might lose interest. And that's when you really knew the herd was coming, because they were still buying in even when there was a huge sell-off in Bitcoin or the like, right?
Well, it was interesting. The first major sell-off I experienced in crypto was way back, 2018. The markets went down 98%. I mean, you can't understand what 98% means. Right. It basically just disappeared. You know, Bitcoin didn't do as bad as the rest, but most of the other coins just disappeared. And what surprised me was people, young, smart people kept coming in and joining. And they were building out what they see as a revolution. At the ethos of crypto, it came from the fact that people lost trust after 2008, the financial crisis. And if you think about the world since 2008, we're in a bear market in trust. And the bear market in trust started in 2008, then we had the European financial crises, we had Brexit, we had Trump being elected the first time, and now we've got riots in LA and people fighting with ICE and a war in Israel and Iran. And like, if you look at 8 different indicators of trust by the Pew organization or Gallup, they're all headed lower. People don't trust institutions, and that's what gave crypto its reason to be. And so it's been a 15-year buildup of that, and here we are now with a real industry. It's $4 trillion plus. We've got Bitcoin as a macro asset on almost everyone's dashboard now. When Larry Fink started talking about getting BlackRock into Bitcoin, it was the snowball rolling downhill. And so Bitcoin is digital gold. We've got stable coins, just saw Circle did an IPO. As payments, that's going to continue to be a big industry. And then the rest, we're going to have tokenization of equities, tokenization of bonds, tokenizations of CDOs, tokenizations of other assets.
You don't want to miss it. Sounds like you don't want to miss it.
Crypto's
and the
here.
fact that the young people were on board, those that had been studying and understood what DeFi is, maybe getting away from the fiat currency, looking into crypto assets as a way, is it a way of humanity around the world to change the, what's behind the revolution, and why did you want to make sure to be a part of it?
So there are two things. One was like a Bitcoin story, which was we don't trust governments with managing their finances. Donald Trump and then Joe Biden and now Donald Trump have raised our national debt more than the rest of the presidents combined. Right? And so governments are tending towards populism here and abroad, and populist governments don't like to save money, they like to spend money.
Right.
You want free college loans, let's give them free college loans, let's wipe off student debt, let's spend more on the military, let's have a of this stuff. It costs money. And so when you're spending more than you're saving, your currency depreciates. And so that was the Bitcoin story. I don't think I would have gone in full time as an industry. What's really interesting about the rest of crypto, these decentralized platforms, which we haven't seen work yet, to be honest, right? They're close. Now they're fast enough and safe enough, and now we're going to have regulation that allows them, is that the ability to have peer-to-peer transfer of value. And so you're going to see it in ticketing, you're going to see it in social media, you're going to see it in finance, lending, this idea of decentralized stuff. It's been in a sandbox till now, and it's about to move out of the sandbox and into the real world.
So let's talk about price targets here for, I mean, Bitcoin right now, when we see it at 110,000, I mean, certainly has held through some real volatile times. I mean, we saw a collapse in the crypto world. It sort of held. The NASDAQ has sold off. It held. It's done well in comparison to gold. It's really been a form that people have begun to trust more. You have ETFs for Bitcoin, and Ethereum, and Solana, and so on are all gaining in popularity. But would you buy this for your kids and your grandkids? Because at 100,000, does it go to 200,000? Does it go to 500,000?
So listen, it's not going to go to $1 million overnight. But if you think that Bitcoin has become digital gold, and it really has. Like
it has.
What's interesting with Bitcoin is the value comes from the social construct. I say it has value. You say it has value. Therefore, it has value. There are not that many things in the world, right? Currencies are like that. Gold is like that. It's valued because we think it is. There are enough people that now think it's valuable. So the price moves on two metrics. One is adoption, more and more people being introduced to it. We call it orange pilling them, right? Somebody orange pilled Larry Fink. That was a big deal because now you got all BlackRock engaged. In Invesco, our partners engaged.
Yeah.
And more financial institutions are engaged. The other is the macro backdrop, which I think continues to be government spending too much money. And so how do I think Bitcoin can go to $1 million? Well, gold is roughly a $20 trillion asset and Bitcoin's roughly a $2 trillion asset. So at one point, we had, Warren Buffett retired, Charlie Munger passed away.
Soft
they didn't
data,
like Bitcoin.
and that
Not
was
Bitcoin
true for oil. We're seeing OPEC announce quota increases, but that the actual production wasn't quite following through. And we've
¿Qué pasó, amiguito?
And that money gets passed down, they're going to be more willing to buy Bitcoin than gold.
Yeah, there's going to be the generational wealth transfer that is due now from those babies.
Ginormous.
It's huge. And you're right. I would say a lot of the younger folks who are interested in Bitcoin are going to have newfound wealth, and they're going to put it to work because they believe that it will go to $1 million. So
and I think gold's going higher as well.
And you think gold
I think
goes
gold can go from 3,000 to 10,000. Not this year, but like, I don't see how the governments are going to get themselves out of this spending problem.
And then meantime, I mean, I will say, the store of value for Bitcoin, I mean, you put in the wallet, and people say as it grows, it really will have more and more value. There's still always the naysayers who say, right now everybody believes in it. There could be some sort of something that goes on social media, the whole world changes their opinion, and then they don't believe in it. And that's sort of one fear people have, and you can address that. The second is quantum, and the momentum of quantum computing. And I've heard that maybe in 5 years, it can break down everybody's passwords and all this. And, so there are still those.
So it's interesting.
Those naysayers.
Anyone who's in Bitcoin has been asked about quantum from the start. And unless you're a computer science guru, you've got to rely on them. What the smartest guys around the space tell me, and I tend to believe them because why not?
Right.
Is that as you get quantum resistant, and so that they're not really worried that yes, when we get quantum computing, it can open any password.
To anything. So it's not just your Bitcoin
folder,
it could be
but
anything.
The Bitcoin engineers are fast at work already at creating the quantum resistant code.
Right.
Madre, son 240, gente.
Again, I wish I was that smart, and we will see. But that's, there's people with a ton of money, with a ton more intellect than I have, that have looked at this and are sleeping like babies.
But you've certainly provided the way to facilitate and bring traditional finance and digital assets together with Galaxy Digital. I mean, that's really
Listen, we set up Galaxy originally as a crypto company. Now it's a holding company with two companies. We have a data center business, which is booming and big. and probably represent at least half the value of the company. And we have this crypto company, which I think is a great company now with the potential to be spectacular. And when I say the potential to be spectacular, most of crypto hasn't happened yet, right? It's been in the sandbox. We don't have decentralized rideshare, or we don't have a huge decentralized finance business. It's growing fast. I think in the next 5 years, you're going to see it explode. And that's what we're set up
so
for.
Yeah, because I got a question from a guru in the crypto world, and he noted that you were fully immersed and very focused with Galaxy, saying you built up a pretty big digital asset investment bank and an AI data center campus, and which part you're most focused on and expects to grow the fastest. What will grow? People want to know what part of Galaxy will grow the fastest.
I have 4 kids, and I love them all. Right now, the easier business to see and invest in is the data center business, because there's this gigantic demand for power up until certainly to 2030 and beyond, and the power that we have access to is 2027, 28, 29.
Sure.
And so we are racing at that.
Señal de corrección, miren.
It's more complicated to figure out what the map looks like in crypto and how to build the map. But I'm racing just as fast. And so we have 600 employees, about 80 are focused on the data center and 520 on the crypto business. I'm about 90% of my, 85, 90% of my effort on the crypto business, and 15 on the data center, though my partner is more data center.
How about companies like MSTR, MicroStrategy, and GameStop, and all these companies that are buying large amounts of Bitcoin? It's called Strategy now. What do you think about these companies?
Listen,
do you buy into those companies?
I think Michael Saylor got in early, is unbelievably charismatic, believes everything he says, and has created MicroStrategy almost like its own crypto. While it buys Bitcoin,
so you're a fan.
People miss. Well, I think he's going to be the
Todos
only
comprando
one
Bitcoin
of these
como moneda de
balance
reserva
sheet
ya.
companies that can keep a premium to Bitcoin. Because there are just too many of the other ones, and you can buy the ETF. So unless you're bringing something beyond buying Bitcoin, like it's an accident. What we learned is people are much more comfortable still buying a stock than buying a crypto, even if the stock just owns crypto, right? But you got an ETF.
I mean, if you took 10 people on the street, most of them would say that.
Yes.
They would be more comfortable
And,
to buy a stock.
Therefore, these balance sheet companies have worked.
Right.
I think if you're going to be a balance sheet company that is sustainable, you're going to have to bring something else to the table. And Michael's brought leverage. He's brought a different approach to bringing capital markets into crypto.
Right.
I think that might give him a shot to keep his premium to Bitcoin longer than others. But
because of his early adoption and who he is and the way he built it.
MicroStrategy is like a crypto. The thing about crypto that changed the way people invest is because there was this breakdown of trust in the world, crypto brought this idea of community as a valuation metric, right? Bitcoin's whole value comes from its community.
I really hope it stays like that for all those crypto investors.
And so, who knows how long community can last? Right now it's but you see it in Palantir, right?
It's beautiful. Palantir's up 500% in a year or so.
But it's a community.
Incredible.
And so you've seen this idea of community. You could call it memic value, right? Like GameStop was a meme stock, it was a community stock. And so I don't know, it's made valuation harder. What I think is going to happen now in crypto, thank God, is because we're going to have a regulatory environment and a legislative clarity around tokens, you're going to have tokens that feel more understandable to most people. Until now, most of the tokens have their value just from community. So it's a narrative story that brings people into the tent.
So at this point now, and the million, you can't say when the million comes. I mean, would you say within the decade?
Yes, within the decade.
You're okay with that?
100%.
Ethereum, not Bitcoin, totally different value propositions. Should people be holding both?
Yes, and it's a different narrative and a different function, but the same value proposition.
But yes, they should have Ethereum.
They should have Ethereum. Listen, Ethereum is the second largest crypto ecosystem. It is by far the dominant ecosystem where people are building on top of. More stable coins will trade on Ethereum, more projects are being built on Ethereum. It's got competition, lots of it. If you look at Ethereum's value, though, it comes from the community. It's money, right? You're not going to be worth $480 billion or whatever Ethereum, more than that now, if it's not money. It's money. And so, just like Bitcoin, it's a store of value. The narrative that draws people to Bitcoin is digital gold. The narrative that draws people to Ethereum is it is building the base layer of trust, this shared database that people are going to trust to build things on top of.
Should they have 50% of their money in crypto? 100% of their money in crypto?
Absolutely not.
I mean, what would you tell someone who's 22 years old?
I think unless you're working in the industry and it's your full-time shtick,
semanal, tercera semana
you
de
know,
junio.
a 15% allocation to crypto is a great allocation.
And what else should be in that portfolio for a young person?
You should have some gold and silver.
Okay.
You should have equities, right? In a high inflation environment or a debased, equities do well.
Right.
Equities have been an amazing investment. I think they're a little rich at this point, but you can't keep them down. You probably should have some real estate, right? It's the one asset you can borrow against from the government early on in your career. So, like, in some ways,
Vamos
the
con
first thing
todo.
you can use to get leverage is real estate.
Right.
Listo, ya se mandó todo. Ethereum va bien. Índices, pues todo lo que está pasando actualmente pues es para que sigan subiendo. Está por verse. Así que va a estar muy interesante esta semana. Tenemos los ingresos de Carnival Cruise Lines Corporation y de FedEx para checar niveles de consumo actual en vacaciones, en cruceros y servicios de logística. Hoy comencé el directo tardísimo, hasta las 9:15, o sea, la mañana con lo de Tesla y todo eso tuve que vender posiciones de varios portafolios. Pero pues ya, estamos, todo bien. Y mañana será otro día en bolsa, ¿va? Así que cuídense, tengan un buen día, una buena semana, un buen desempeño en bolsa. Todos podemos estar en este mundo, siempre y cuando esté regulado, tanto la casa de bolsa como la Comisión Nacional